What if the very ground beneath your feet, the very air you breathe, was steeped in a history not of human triumph, but of an ancient, insatiable hunger that predates all recorded time? What if a generational burden, a primordial pact forged in the deepest, most terrifying reaches of the ocean, lay dormant for centuries, only to awaken now and demand its unimaginable bloody price? This is not fiction. This is a chilling account drawn from the shadowed, far from the pulse of modern civilization, where the relentless Pacific Ocean incessantly carves the rugged Oregon coast, lies a place known to local mariners only as the Devil's Tooth. It is a desolate, craggy promontory, perpetually shrouded in an impenetrable, heavy fog that seems to absorb all light and sound, holding on to the deep, resonant silence of centuries. Here, the mournful, almost human wail of a solitary, ancient foghorn carries more than just a warning against hidden reefs. It echoes with the ancient laments of the deep, a constant, low thrum against the perpetually salt-laden air that hums with an unspoken history of dark waters, inexplicable disappearances, and whispers of things that refuse to stay buried. For generations, the Blackwood lineage has dwelled within their isolated, weather-beaten estate, their lives inextricably bound to this forbidding stretch of coastline. They are direct descendants of intrepid 19th-century whalers and cartographers, men who charted unknown waters and perhaps unknowingly awakened something best left undisturbed. But their inheritance is not merely land. It is a profound, undeniable burden as ancient as the tides, a malevolent presence dredged from an abyss that refuses to be forgotten. Whispers of a primordial pact, of forbidden knowledge gleaned from waters untamed by human maps, have echoed through their ancestral halls for 100 years, culminating now in a terrifying, tangible return. What began as a family's adventurous maritime pursuit has warped into an all-consuming, creeping dread, an inexorable tide of horror that demands a blood price for secrets long buried beneath the waves, defying the very laws of nature and the fragile sanity of those who inherit them. The patriarch, Elias Blackwood, a man burdened by generations of unspoken truths, clings desperately to an ancient, leather-bound logbook. Its brittle pages are filled not with triumphs, but with cryptic charts, unsettling sketches of impossible creatures, and dire prophetic warnings. A terrestrial and terrible inheritance passed down through his very bloodline. His daughter, Clara, an aspiring marine biologist, a woman of science and logic, finds her rational mind utterly at war with the burgeoning, undeniable horrors now encroaching upon their lives. She grapples with the terrifying notion that her ancestors, in their blind, relentless pursuit of discovery, somehow disturbed a slumbering oceanic truth, awakened an entity or a force so ancient, so unfathomable, that it now utterly defies the very laws of nature and every boundary of human sanity. This is the genesis of their desperate struggle, not merely against an unknown entity that lurks beneath the waves, but against the unforgiving, relentless tide of their own cursed past. It is a fight to undo a primordial curse unleashed by their ancestors' fatal curiosity, a battle for survival against an awakened abyssal power that threatens to consume them entirely, to drag them into an eternal darkness from which there is no escape. Can a family truly escape the unforgiving depths of their past? Or are some legacies destined to drown their inheritors in the ocean's darkest, most guarded secrets? Join us as we dive into the oceanic depths, into a truth so profound it will shatter your perception of reality. Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your understanding of the oceans forever. Are you ready to join us on this journey into the unknown depths? In the desolate quiet of the Oregon coast, where the Blackwood legacy wrestled with an encroaching terror, a desperate plea for help reached beyond the fog-shrouded headlands. Clara Blackwood, clinging to the last threads of scientific reason amidst the ancestral dread, extended her hand to the one entity she believed could ground the unfolding nightmare in verifiable truth. The Unspoken Sea investigative team. But the initial response was not one of immediate alarm. Finch was a senior professor at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, renowned for his groundbreaking work in abyssal geology and the meticulous debunking of maritime anomalies. His career had been built on separating verifiable fact from the flotsam of legend, his methodologies unimpeachable, his analysis incisive. Dr. Finch approached Clara's initial communications with a professional detachment. Her tale of inherited curses and monstrous visitations striking him as little more than local folklore given tragic new life. He was a scientist, a pragmatist, grounded in the observable universe. His world was one of seismic wave patterns, bathymetric maps, and the cold, hard data gleaned from remotely operated vehicles. Yet even through his hardened skepticism, a flicker of professional curiosity was ignited by the specific details Clara provided. The precise coordinates of the unprecedented deep-sea seismic events, the synchronized disappearance of fishing trawlers, and the chilling, truncated distress calls that defied conventional explanation. These were not mere ghost stories. These were potential data points, however distorted by panic. His scientific methodology demanded a thorough, systematic approach. Dismissal was not an option without rigorous investigation. Dr. Finch's initial response was to request every scrap of verifiable information Clara could provide. Sonar logs, fishing vessel manifests, meteorological data from the dates of the disappearances, even geological surveys of the Devil's Tooth region. He sought patterns, statistical deviations, any tangible anomaly that could be extracted from the burgeoning chaos of the Blackwood family's claims. For Dr. Finch, the deep ocean was a complex system governed by immutable laws, not a stage for ancient pacts. His expertise lay in unraveling natural phenomena, in finding the logical cascade of events behind the most baffling occurrences. If something truly extraordinary was unfolding off the coast of Oregon, he intended to find its scientific root, to expose the underlying mechanisms, and perhaps, in the process, offer a rational explanation for a family's descent into what appeared to be collective delusion. He was coming not to believe, but to observe, to analyze, to dissect the unknown with the sharp blade of scientific inquiry. Are you ready to join us on this journey into the unknown depths? The ancient sorrow, embedded in the very stones of the Blackwood estate, that mournful foghorn wail, echoing the laments of the deep, was not merely a poetic flourish. It was a prelude. For generations, the Blackwoods had been keepers of a strange, chilling silence, a familial burden shrouded in the mists of their isolated Oregon coast. But the silence had recently fractured, giving way to a symphony of terror, far more immediate and terrifying than any ancestral whisper. The whispers solidified into screams with the unprecedented deep-sea seismic events that began to ripple outward from the Devil's Tooth, the treacherous promontory where the Blackwood home clung precariously to the cliffside. These tremors were not mere geological shifts. They felt like the slow, grinding groan of something awakening from an impossibly deep slumber. And with their unsettling cadence came the disappearances. Local fishing trawlers, hardy vessels that had plied these waters for decades, vanished without a trace. Their final distress calls, patched through static-laced radio channels, painted a picture of unfathomable horror. Frantic shouts, the rending of metal, and then, most chillingly, a cacophony of inhuman cries, sounds utterly alien to any known marine life, before the abrupt, absolute silence. Where did these vessels go? What force could consume steel hulls and seasoned crews without leaving so much as a splinter of wreckage? A single oil slick on the churning waves. The ocean, usually a vast, indifferent mirror, now seemed to actively conceal its secrets, pulling them into a lightless void. It was as if the very water had become a hungry, living maw, swallowing evidence whole. Poor Elias Blackwood, the family patriarch, these real-world horrors converged with the haunting legacy he carried. His ancient logbook, filled with cryptic charts and dire warnings, once a mere relic of his forebears, now pulsed with a terrifying new relevance. The seismic tremors and the disappearances triggered within him vivid, debilitating visions. He saw submerged cyclopean architecture, vast structures of impossible geometry reaching through the abyssal gloom, and monstrous forms moving within their shadows, figures that defied biological classification, yet were undeniably real within the confines of his tormented mind. These were not nightmares, but a terrifying window into an awakening truth, compelling him towards an unknown purpose. His daughter Clara, an aspiring marine biologist whose life had been dedicated to the rational study of ocean ecosystems, found her scientific understanding shattered by the encroaching, undeniable horrors. Every logical explanation crumbled before the sheer impossibility of what was unfolding. The ocean she knew, the one she loved, was revealing a face she could not comprehend, a primordial force demanding a blood price. How could she reconcile the orderly world of marine science with the burgeoning, undeniable evidence of an unleashed, ancient terror? The weight of her ancestors' transgression, of a primordial pact disturbed, pressed down on her with suffocating force. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that her family was inextricably linked to this escalating dread. The Blackwoods were not just observers, they were participants in a cosmic drama, drawn into the maelstrom by an inherited curse. The struggle was no longer theoretical. It was a desperate fight for survival, for sanity. Clara understood that to save her father, to understand the escalating horror, she could no longer rely solely on scientific inquiry. The scope of this mystery transcended human comprehension, requiring a different kind of investigation. Are you ready to dive with us into this unexplored abyssal world? In a desperate bid for answers, Clara made a decision that would forever alter their fate. She reached out, beyond the isolated confines of the Devil's Tooth, to an organization whispered about in obscure maritime circles, a group specializing in the truly inexplicable, known only as the Unspoken Sea Investigative Team. Their arrival would mark the beginning of a chilling documentation, an unflinching descent into the inherited nightmare of the Blackwood lineage. What they would uncover might challenge everything we believe about the ocean's depths. The air around the Devil's Tooth had always carried a certain weight, a mournful whisper from the Pacific's vast, cold embrace. But in recent months, that whisper had escalated into a growing thrum, an unsettling tremor that resonated not just in the ground beneath the Blackwood estate, but in the very fabric of their lives. It began subtly, a series of low-frequency vibrations detected by remote sensors far offshore, dismissed initially as minor geological shifts, typical of the volatile Pacific Ring of Fire. Yet their frequency and intensity defied simple explanation. These weren't mere quakes, they were pulsations, rhythmic and deep, as if some colossal, unseen engine stirred in the abyssal plains hundreds of miles out, directly west of their isolated promontory. Then, the tremors began to coincide with something far more disturbing. The first disappearance was written off as a tragic accident, a rogue wave or equipment failure claiming the trawler Sea Serpent and its three-man crew. No wreckage, no oil slick, just a last, garbled distress call that spoke of something immense, something other, before a sudden, violent shriek, unlike anything mechanical or human, severed the connection. The Coast Guard searched for weeks, their efforts yielding nothing but the endless, unyielding expanse of the ocean. But then came the Orion's Folly, followed by the Silent Hunter, vanishing in quick succession, each incident mirroring the last with chilling precision. The pattern became undeniable, the deep-sea seismic events, always preceding or coinciding with the vessel's last known positions. The distress calls grew increasingly frantic, filled not with the sounds of a storm or a collision, but with an escalating terror, punctuated by sounds that chilled the blood of even seasoned mariners. A groaning, tearing sound, followed by the same unnatural, guttural roar that had claimed the Sea Serpent. What force, unknown to nautical charts or seismic models, could swallow entire ships whole, leaving no trace? What dark current pulled them into oblivion? For Clara Blackwood, a scientist whose life was dedicated to understanding the ocean's intricate ecosystems, these events were an assault on her very understanding of reality. Her instruments, her data, her meticulous observations screened for a rational explanation, yet the truth unfolding before her defied every known law of physics and marine biology. Her father, Elias, grew increasingly withdrawn, his grip on the ancient logbook tightening, his eyes haunted by visions he refused to fully articulate. Visions he claimed were of cyclopean structures rising from the submerged chasms, and titanic shapes moving within the fathomless darkness. The community, initially gripped by grief, was now consumed by a cold, creeping fear. No one dared venture past a certain demarcation line, a silent, unspoken boundary drawn by the vanished vessels. The foghorn's wail, once a familiar comfort, now seemed to echo the very screams of the lost, a lament for those dragged into an unseen maw. What primal hunger had awakened in the depths, and what terrifying link did it share with the ancient secrets Elias Blackwood guarded so fiercely? The whispers of the Blackwood lineage, echoing through generations, are not merely folklore. They are the spectral resonance of a specific, catastrophic moment in time, etched into the very fabric of their family history. To truly comprehend the terror now gripping Clara and Elias, we must sail back to the mid-19th century, to a brutal era of maritime expansion and the insatiable quest for dominion over the unknown. It was during this period that the Blackwood name first began to truly unravel, not in the distant, icy waters of Cape Horn, as some legends suggest, but far closer to their ancestral home, off the craggy, treacherous coast of Oregon. The original Blackwoods were not just whalers. They were pioneers of the Pacific Northwest, cartographers, charting the raw, untamed edges of the world, driven by a thirst for both knowledge and profit. They were men of iron will and unwavering superstition, their lives dictated by the capricious moods of the ocean. It was their ship, the Sea Serpent, under the command of Jedediah Blackwood, Elias's great-great-grandfather, that ventured beyond the known shipping lanes, drawn by anomalies in their nascent hydrographic surveys. Jedediah, a man renowned for his meticulous logs, began to record increasingly bizarre entries. Not just new depths or currents, but peculiar disturbances, inexplicable bioluminescent phenomena, and unsettling acoustic signatures from the abyssal plain near what would later be christened the Devil's Tooth. His logbook, a leather-bound relic now guarded by Elias, is a chilling testament to a discovery that defied every scientific and spiritual understanding of the era. On a cold, fog-choked day in 1867, the Sea Serpent encountered a disturbance unlike any other. A sudden, massive upwelling, as if the ocean floor itself had sighed, brought forth not merely sediment, but strange, geometrically precise fragments of an unknown, obsidian-like material, impossibly smooth and cold to the touch. These were not natural rock formations. They were shards of something ancient, something constructed. Jedediah's sketches, crude yet terrifyingly precise, depict structures that seem to mock the very concept of human architecture. A hidden monument of cyclopean scale, glimpsed only in the transient chaos of a seismic shift. The log entries grow increasingly frantic, detailing not only the physical fragments, but the unsettling presence they seem to herald. Whispers of the Fortress of Silence and Guardians of the Deep began to infiltrate the crew's journals, chilling accounts of unnatural shadows moving beneath the hull, of a low, resonant thrumming that vibrated through the ship's timbers, and a pervasive, crushing pressure that left the most seasoned sailors weeping in their bunks. What primordial force did Jedediah's ambition unwittingly awaken? What forgotten architecture did his exploratory zeal unearth? And what terrible price was extracted for this brief, horrifying glimpse into the abyss? Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever. The initial tremors had been dismissed as an anomaly, mere geological rumblings along a volatile coast. But as weeks bled into a relentless, fog-laden autumn, the earth beneath the Devil's Tooth began to groan with an unnatural cadence. It was not the familiar shifting of tectonic plates, but a deeper, more resonant thrumming that seemed to emanate from the very core of the abyss. The sea, once a provider, now writhed with an unsettling malice. The mournful wail of the foghorn, once a somber warning, now felt like a desperate plea, lost in the omnipresent mists that clung to the Blackwood estate like a shroud, woven from primordial dread. Then came the disappearances. Fishing trawlers, sturdy vessels that had navigated these treacherous waters for decades, vanished without a trace. Their final distress calls, patched through static-riddled radios, were not the panicked cries of men battling a storm, but a chorus of screams abruptly cut short, followed by an unnerving, guttural sound that defied any known biological classification. It was a sound that haunted the airwaves, a chilling echo of something ancient and terrible stirring beneath the waves. The Coast Guard's searches yielded nothing but a few splintered planks, fragments of wood scorched as if by an unholy fire, bearing no resemblance to any known maritime disaster. The ocean was not merely taking, it was erasing. Within the isolated walls of the Blackwood home, Elias's condition deteriorated rapidly. His waking hours became indistinguishable from a waking nightmare. He would stumble through the house, his eyes wide and vacant, muttering about impossible structures of cyclopean stone, rising from the crushing pressures of the deep. He described vast, unseen cities carved into oceanic trenches, inhabited by forms too immense, too alien to comprehend. These were not the ramblings of a man succumbing to age. They were the terrifyingly lucid accounts of a mind forced to confront a reality that shredded sanity. He spoke of ancient pacts, of guardians roused from slumber, of a debt finally coming due. Clara, the marine biologist, found her scientific convictions crumbling under the relentless assault of the inexplicable. Her instruments, usually so precise, now registered chaotic energy surges emanating from the deep, pulses of power that defied physics. The ocean, her life study, had become an alien entity, a vast, malevolent consciousness asserting its dominion. The logical frameworks of her world were shattered. How could she explain the spectral images that flickered across her father's eyes, or the primal terror that now gripped their coastal community? The whispers of the family curse had manifested into a terrifying, undeniable truth. The Blackwoods were not just battling the unknown. They were fighting their own inheritance. The weight of generations of secrets, of a transgression committed in forgotten waters, pressed down on them. Clara knew then that the answers, and perhaps their salvation, lay not in the textbooks of marine biology, but in the forbidden knowledge held within Elias's ancient logbook, and in the hands of those who dared to investigate the truly inexplicable. Her ancestors had opened a door, and now something immense was stepping through. Are you ready to join us on this journey into the unknown depths, to confront what the Blackwoods awakened? The initial response from the Unspoken Sea investigative team was not one of immediate dismissal, but rather a measured academic curiosity, tinged with a palpable concern that transcended mere professional interest. Dr. Eris Thorne, a leading marine geophysicist from the collective, was the first to arrive at the Devil's Tooth, his gaze immediately drawn to the perpetual shroud of fog that clung to the Blackwood estate. He was a man accustomed to the ocean's vast, indifferent power, yet the air here hummed with something far older, far more malevolent than any natural phenomenon. Clara, her academic rigor strained to its breaking point by the encroaching dread, presented him with her father's logbook, a relic bound in salt-stained leather, its pages filled with elegant, archaic script and disturbing sketches of geometries that defied earthly origin. Elias, now frequently lost in the throes of his waking nightmares, spoke in fragmented sentences of abyssal cities and the gnawing hunger of entities that dwelled in the unlit chasms. His words, once dismissed as the ramblings of a man under immense stress, now resonated with an unsettling precision, describing structures that mirrored the impossible angles within the logbook's cryptic diagrams. Dr. Thorne, a scientist by trade, found himself grappling with a narrative that bled from the purely geological into the terrifyingly mythological. The recent seismic events, initially categorized as anomalous deep-sea tremors, now seemed to possess a rhythmic, almost deliberate quality. His instruments, deployed within hours of his arrival, began to pick up patterns beneath the waves that were utterly unprecedented. These weren't mere tectonic shifts. They were resonant frequencies, too uniform, too powerful to be natural. They spoke of something vast, moving, perhaps even awakening beneath the very bedrock of the continental shelf. What force could orchestrate such profound disturbances, not as isolated incidents, but as a chilling crescendo? The disappearances of the fishing trawlers, initially attributed to the treacherous currents and hidden reefs, now took on a sinister new context. Their final distress calls, fragmented recordings Clara had managed to recover from the Coast Guard archives, contained not just the sounds of structural collapse, but an escalating chorus of guttural, non-human cries, chillingly reminiscent of the ancient warnings penned in Elias's ancestor's log. Were these the laments of the deep, or something far more terrifying? As Dr. Thorne analyzed the new data, a disquieting truth began to emerge. The seismic readings pointed to a specific, localized area beneath the Devil's Tooth, a vast, uncharted anomaly that resonated with a peculiar, almost cyclical energy signature. It was as if something immense was stirring, broadcasting its presence from the very heart of the abyss. This wasn't merely a geological mystery. It was an intelligence, an ancient, slumbering power that had perhaps been inadvertently roused by the very lineage that now suffered its wrath. The lines between scientific inquiry and inherited nightmare were blurring fast. Join us as we dive deeper into the abyss, for the echoes of this ancient awakening are just beginning to reverberate. The initial data gathered by the Unspoken Sea team painted a picture not of isolated incidents, but of a pattern disturbing in its consistency. The seismic signatures near Devil's Tooth were anomalous, unlike any known geological activity. They resonated with a peculiar rhythm, almost a pulse, rather than the sharp jolt of tectonic shifts. And the recordings from the vanished trawlers, once processed, yielded more than mere static. Beneath the chaotic final screams, an unnerving bass thrum, a sound that seemed to vibrate not through the air, but through the very bone. What strange resonance could possess such a profound physical effect? For generations, the craggy coast of Oregon, near what locals had long dubbed the Devil's Tooth, held a sinister reputation for consuming vessels without trace. Yet, maritime archives, when meticulously scoured by the investigative team, began to reveal a darker narrative than simple treacherous reefs. Beyond the countless known shipwrecks, a cluster of peculiar disappearances stood out. Not merely lost to storms, but seemingly erased. Accounts from the late 1800s spoke of whaling ships returning with crews afflicted by an inexplicable madness, whispering of cyclopean structures beneath the waves, of ancient lights that pulsed from the abyss, and of a silence so profound it stole one's very soul. These were dismissed as sailors' superstitions, the ravings of men broken by the sea. But what if these weren't fables, but fractured glimpses of a terrible truth? Elias Blackwood's logbook, a tome of faded ink and cryptic symbols, contains sketches disturbingly similar to these whispered descriptions. His ancestor, a certain Captain Josiah Blackwood, meticulously documented an encounter in these very waters, not with a leviathan of flesh and blood, but with an immense, unmoving shadow, a geometric impossibility that defied the natural curvature of the ocean floor. Josiah's subsequent entries grew erratic, filled with warnings against disturbing the sleeper and strange, almost ritualistic notations concerning lunar cycles and tidal flows. He believed the fortress to be a threshold, a gate to something primordial, a place where the veil between worlds thinned. Could Josiah Blackwood have not only witnessed the fortress, but perhaps even unwittingly engaged with its occupants? Clara, Her hands trembling over her father's ancestral journal, found herself trapped between the cold logic of her scientific training and the chilling corroboration offered by these forgotten maritime tragedies. Every seismic tremor, every faint echo from the abyss, every entry in that accursed logbook seemed to drag the world she understood further into an alien darkness. She sought rational explanations, geological anomalies, deep-sea acoustics, but the sheer volume of coincidence, the chilling precision of Elias's visions mirroring historical accounts, began to erode her professional certainty. Was the ocean itself alive, sentient, and now, finally, stirring from a long slumber? Was Elias's terrifying inheritance more than just a family curse? Was it a universal truth, finally asserting its claim? The whispers from the deep were growing louder, demanding attention, and perhaps a reckoning. What unspeakable pact had the Blackwoods truly forged with the abyss generations ago, and what price was now being exacted? The Unspoken Sea investigative team, accustomed to the ocean's silent and vast mysteries, found themselves on the craggy Oregon coast, a place where the very air seemed to hold its breath. Clara's desperation had been palpable, her voice laced with an urgency that transcended mere scientific curiosity. As their specialized equipment was unloaded onto the rain-slicked docks, a profound unease settled upon them. This was no typical environmental anomaly. The energy pulsating from the Devil's Tooth was something ancient, something that resonated with the primal fear buried deep within the human psyche. Elias Blackwood, gaunt and shadowed, watched their preparations with eyes that seemed to see beyond the veil of the material world. His tremors had intensified, his whispers growing more frantic, filled with fragmented images of submerged spires and geometries that defied earthly construction. Clara, torn between the rational world of marine biology and the undeniable terror gripping her family, pleaded with the team to understand that this was not a matter of scientific study, but a battle for their very souls. Her ancestors, she insisted, had stirred something that should have remained dormant. The team's initial acoustic scans of the seafloor off the Devil's Tooth yielded anomalies unlike anything recorded in their vast database. Echoes returned, not from the natural contours of the ocean bed, but from colossal, geometrically precise structures impossibly deep. They appeared to shift, almost breathe, beneath layers of silt and sediment, as if resisting the very act of observation. The raw data alone was enough to send a chill down the spine of even the most hardened oceanographer. This was the first cold, numerical contact with something truly alien. But the true first contact was not through digital readouts or abstract charts. It began with the air itself. A sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature, despite the mild coastal breeze, swept across the Blackwood estate. The mournful wail of the foghorn, usually a lonely lament, seemed to be answered by a deep, resonant hum emanating from the churning waters below. It was a sound that vibrated in the bones, a low-frequency thrumming that was felt more than heard, carrying with it a chilling sense of immense, unyielding power. Then the water began to move. Not the natural ebb and flow of the tide, but an unnatural disturbance, a localized turmoil directly offshore from the Devil's Tooth. The surface began to churn violently, as if a colossal, unseen entity was stirring beneath the black waves. The fishing boats that had disappeared Their last signals filled with inhuman cries now seemed a terrifying premonition. The air grew heavy, charged with an invisible pressure that made breathing difficult. A primal fear seizing all who witnessed the spectacle. Suddenly, a massive swirling vortex erupted in the agitated waters, its maw impossibly wide, sucking at the ocean itself. From its depths, a faint, phosphorescent glow began to emanate, casting an eerie, shifting light onto the low-hanging fog and the craggy cliffs. It pulsed rhythmically, a beat that seemed to synchronize with Elias Blackwood's own frantic heart, causing him to collapse, convulsing on the damp ground, screaming about the eye, the hunger, and the fortress rising. The glowing vortex intensified, revealing not merely light, but fractured glimpses of something colossal beneath the surface. Cyclopean forms, not of rock or coral, but of obsidian dark, perfectly smooth architecture, momentarily caught in the glow before being swallowed again by the churning maelstrom. It was a glimpse into a world that defied all known physics, a fleeting vision of an impossible stronghold. What was this luminous emanation from the abyss? Was it a beacon, a warning, or something far more sinister, beckoning them into its depths? This first contact was not gentle. It was a violent, undeniable assertion of a presence that had lain. Could this be the fortress itself, flexing its unseen muscles, announcing its reawakening? Or was it merely a herald, a terrifying glimpse of the true guardians of the deep? Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever. The tremors were no longer isolated incidents. For days, the craggy coast near the Devil's Tooth had reverberated with a low, primal growl, a sound vibrating not just through the ground, but through the very bones of those who heard it. This deep guttural thrumming was a herald, a prelude to the vanishings. Fishing trawlers, vessels of varying sizes, began to simply disappear. The sea, once a provider, now swallowed them whole, leaving no trace, no debris, only a chilling void where they had been. The final transmissions from the Orion, a sturdy crab boat whose captain hailed from generations of local fishermen, became a coastal legend of terror. What began as panicked shouts, desperate pleas for help against an unseen force, swiftly devolved into a horrifying chorus. Interspersed with the human screams, distinct and utterly alien, were sounds that defied known marine biology. A guttural roar, a wet, sucking noise, and a high-pitched shriek that seemed to tear at the fabric of sanity itself. Then, absolute silence. The Orion's last known coordinates, perilously close to the treacherous, submerged reefs off the Devil's Tooth. An echo of a deeper, more monstrous truth. Elias Blackwood was not merely observing these escalating horrors. He was consumed by them. His visions, once fleeting glimpses, now held him captive. He spoke of cyclopean architecture, impossibly vast structures fashioned from dark, polished stone, submerged in an unfathomable abyss, pillars that vanished into a lightless void, arches spanning chasms that defied earthly scale. And within these abyssal ruins, movement, shapes of immense proportion, indistinct yet terrifying, shifting in the perpetual gloom. Tentacles, perhaps, or something far older, far more alien. He would awaken screaming, drenched in sweat. Describing a pressure so immense it felt as if his very skull would implode. His mind, once a repository of Blackwood lore, was now a conduit to a forgotten, terrifying realm. Clara, witnessing her father's rapid decline, understood that conventional explanations were useless. The seismic activity wasn't mere tectonics. It was too localized, too rhythmic. The vanishings weren't just accidents. There were those horrifying broadcasts. Elias's visions, though maddening, contained elements too specific to be delusion. She needed answers that transcended local superstition, answers that demanded a broader, more specialized lens. The decision, agonizing as it was, became inevitable. She contacted the Unspoken Sea. Their reputation was a whispered enigma, a clandestine group specializing in oceanic anomalies that defied conventional understanding. They were her final, desperate gamble. But what would this desperate plea unleash? And what price would their intervention demand from a family already teetering on the edge of a horrifying revelation? Are you ready to join us as we dive into this unexplored abyssal world, where the truth is stranger and far more terrifying than any fiction? Clara Blackwood, an oceanographer, desperate to save her father from the terrifying visions consuming him, turned to the Unspoken Sea team as a last resort. Their investigation had quickly moved beyond the inexplicable seismic tremors and the harrowing disappearances of fishing trawlers off the Devil's Tooth. It became clear that the true horror lay not just in the present, but in the echoes of a distant past. The key to understanding this creeping dread, Elias had insisted, lay within the ancient, brine-stained logbook, a relic passed down through generations of Blackwoods. This wasn't merely a family heirloom. It was a chronicle of ancestral transgression, a document of obsession and dread dating back to the mid-19th century. Captain Alastair Blackwood, the family patriarch of that era, a renowned whaler and cartographer, meticulously penned entries detailing voyages that pushed the boundaries of known maritime charts. While his initial expeditions were aimed at the rich whaling grounds of the Southern Ocean, the logbook takes a chilling turn during a fateful journey in 1867, not off the legendary Cape Horn, but surprisingly close to the very shores where the Blackwood estate now stands, off the rugged Oregon coast. Alastair's entries describe an unprecedented storm, a maelstrom unlike any he had witnessed, which flung his vessel far off course into an uncharted expanse of water near a series of jagged, previously unmarked reefs. Amidst the chaos of the tempest, his crew reported strange, phosphorescent lights emanating from the abyssal depths, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. Sonar readings, primitive though they were, indicated anomalies of immense scale, geometric patterns defying natural formation, deep beneath the churning surface. Alastair, driven by an unyielding curiosity and the cartographer's desire to uncover the world's hidden truths, ordered his men to deploy a newly developed deep-sea dredge. What they retrieved, pieced together over weeks, was not gold, nor lost treasure, but fragments of an impossibly ancient dark stone, veined with unknown metallic alloys. These were not natural formations. They bore the unmistakable marks of deliberate, colossal construction. The logbook speaks of a growing unease among the crew, of whispers carried on the wind, of fleeting shadows in the water, too large to be any known marine life. Alastair's meticulous drawings illustrate complex, interlocking structures, vast and inhuman, hinting at something immense, something truly alien, resting on the seabed. He called it, in a chillingly prescient entry, the sunken citadel, a place where the ocean's very silence seemed to hum with an unbearable antiquity. But the discovery was not merely architectural. Buried within the ruins, Alastair claimed to have found something else, something that radiated an intelligence, a primordial presence that spoke not in words, but in a profound, unsettling vibration that resonated deep within the soul. The subsequent entries become more erratic, filled with cryptic warnings about the price of knowledge and the slumbering guardians. What pact, what bargain did Captain Alistair Blackwood make in that abyssal realm? What dark seed did he bring back to shore, unknowingly planting the roots of a generational curse that now demands a blood price? The logbook ends abruptly with a final, chilling statement. We have awakened that which was best left undisturbed. May God forgive us. But was it God that needed to forgive them? Or something far older, far more demanding, stirred from its ancient slumber in the depths? And what did this historical discovery truly unleash upon the world? Are you ready to uncover the secrets of the deep? The once predictable rhythm of the Oregon coast had fractured. The mournful wail of the foghorn, once a somber lullaby, now seemed to carry a distorted chorus, a low, guttural thrum that vibrated not through the air, but through the very earth beneath the Blackwood estate. It was subtle at first, dismissed as residual seismic activity, an aftershock of the deep-sea tremors that had initiated this new era of dread. But then, the water itself began to change. The currents off the Devil's Tooth, known for their treacherous churning power, developed an unnatural stillness in certain pockets, like patches of oil across the ocean's vast canvas, reflecting the slate-gray sky with an unsettling, mirror-like calm. Yet beneath this placid surface, something else moved. Local fishermen, those few brave or foolish enough to still venture out, spoke of shadows too large, too sinuous, to be any known marine creature passing just beneath their hulls, leaving behind a faint, almost metallic tang in the air. Their nets, when pulled from these still zones, often came up not with fish, but with strange, calcified fragments, unlike any shell or coral known to science, glistening with an internal, phosphorescent light that quickly faded to a dull, dead gray upon exposure to the air. What were these fragments, and what colossal forms did they once adorn? Clara, armed with the sophisticated instruments brought by the Unspoken Sea team, confirmed the anomalies. The deep-sea thermoclines were wildly erratic, registering sudden, localized temperature drops of impossible magnitude, hinting at frigid currents rising from depths hitherto uncharted. Hydrophones deployed near the Devil's Tooth picked up not just the expected clicks and whistles of marine life, but complex, rhythmic pulses like an impossibly slow, deliberate heartbeat echoing from the abyssal plain. Elias, his eyes often distant and haunted, claimed these were the very cadences of his visions, the rhythmic pulse of the ancient machine, the fortress itself, awakening. Was his mind merely unraveling, or was it a receiver for a truth too terrible to comprehend? The disappearances, once isolated incidents, now took on a horrifying new pattern. Fishing trawlers weren't just vanishing. Their distress signals, before cutting out, included a chilling crescendo of sounds, the snap of breaking metal, the shriek of panicked gulls, and then, unmistakable, a collective human scream, followed by a wet, guttural roar that no animal on Earth should be capable of producing. These were not the cries of the deep from myth, but something tangible, terrifyingly real. The Coast Guard, baffled, offered no answers, only theories of rogue waves or unforeseen squalls, theories that rang hollow in the face of the mounting evidence. The phenomenon was no longer confined to Elias's haunted mind or ancient logbooks. It was a hungry, palpable presence reaching out from the deep, What hunger was stirring beneath the waves, and what was it truly seeking? The abyssal silence, a tangible weight, pressed in on the investigators within the submersible's confines. As the Unspoken Sea team navigated the treacherous geology off Devil's Tooth, their sonar array began to paint a picture, not of nature's chaotic design, but of an unsettling regularity. Anomalies, subtle yet persistent, emerged from the deep, hinting at formations that defied known geological processes. It was in the crushing blackness of the abyssal plain, miles beneath the surface, that they encountered it. A structure, not carved by water or current, but wrought with impossible precision. Imagine vast, interlocking basaltic blocks, seemingly fused by unknown heat, forming colossal, geometric patterns on the seabed. These were not tumbled remnants of ancient landmasses, but the deliberate architecture of something utterly alien. Initial spectral analysis returned impossible readings, isotopes unknown to terrestrial science, minerals exhibiting extraordinary density, and an intrinsic magnetic field that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic hum. This wasn't merely a ruin. It felt like a dormant mechanism, an intricate part of a much larger, unseen apparatus. The implications were immediate and terrifying. If this truly was architecture, who were its builders? How could such a civilization exist, or have existed, at depths where no known intelligent life could endure? Every scientific principle seemed to shatter against the stark reality of this discovery. The Blackwood logbook, dismissed by many as sailors' myths, suddenly gained chilling veracity. Elias's visions of submerged cyclopean structures were no longer the ravings of a burdened mind, but disturbing premonitions of a terrifying truth. We plunged deeper into the heart of this enigma. Further scans revealed vast, interconnected caverns beneath the detected structure, suggesting a complex network stretching far beyond the initial discovery. Was this the secret fortress whispered about in the Blackwood legacy? A sanctuary? A prison? Or something sinister? The air in the submersible grew heavy with a mixture of awe and profound dread. Then came the biological samples. Attached to the enigmatic blocks were organisms unlike any catalogued in humanity's record of marine life. They were not merely adapted to the extreme pressures and temperatures. They seemed intrinsically linked to the material itself, drawing sustenance from its peculiar energetic emanations. Their cellular structures were bewilderingly complex, reminiscent of deep-sea invertebrates, yet displaying alarming, almost intelligent movement when disturbed. One particular sample, a fragment of what appeared to be ossified tissue, exhibited bioluminescence that pulsed in sync with the structure's faint hum. It was a living component of the fortress itself. This was not a natural ecosystem. It was a deliberate, horrifying symphony of life and stone, orchestrated by something incomprehensible. The lines between geology, biology, and intelligent design blurred into a terrifying new category of existence. What entity could engineer life to thrive here, drawing power from its dwelling's very fabric? The evidence suggested a power that did not merely adapt to the deep, but commanded it. Are we witnessing the remains of a primordial intelligence that shaped the very abyss? And if so, what became of them, and what dormant hunger might their legacy now awaken? The spectral echoes continued their descent, each wave of inexplicable energy radiating from the abyssal rift near Devil's Tooth, a signature unlike any known tectonic activity. Our initial hypotheses, ranging from deep-sea volcanic tremors to advanced military experiments, crumbled under the weight of accumulating contradictory data. What emerged instead were patterns that defied geological logic, frequencies that seemed to undulate with an unnatural pulse, almost deliberate. Elias Blackwood's increasingly vivid waking nightmares, once dismissed as mere stress-induced phantoms, began to synchronize with these seismic events. He described not just cyclopean architecture, but vast, intricate machinery, a lattice of unknown purpose stretching into the abyssal gloom, powered by a force that felt both ancient and alive. His daughter, Clara, found herself caught between the cold, hard data streaming from the probes and the terrifying specificity of her father's visions. She pored over the fragmented, water-damaged pages of the Blackwood logbook, hoping to find a scientific explanation, a rational anchor in a sea of encroaching madness. But the more she read, the more the lines blurred between inherited paranoia and an unfolding impossible truth. One particular entry, scrawled in faded ink by Elias's great-great-grandfather, Nathaniel Blackwood, spoke of a lament of the churning heart emanating from below the waves. A sound more felt than heard, which preceded a wave of strange illness and vanished fishing vessels in the late 19th century. Local archives revealed a period of inexplicable maritime losses around Cape Horn during that exact time frame, dismissed then as rogue storms or navigational errors. But the Blackwood logbook detailed something far more insidious, a profound, suffocating despair that gripped the coastal community, a feeling of being watched, of something rising from the profound darkness. Were these merely superstitious fears of an isolated populace, or the nascent stirrings of what the family now faced? The Unspoken Sea team's deep-sea sonar scans, overlapping with Elias's recent tremors, began to map out anomalous structures on the ocean floor. Formations that were too regular, too vast to be natural geological features. They spoke of spires and impossibly smooth walls, a geometry that hinted at a construction beyond human scale, far deeper than any known civilization could have reached. It was as if the ancient mariners of the Blackwood Line had stumbled upon not just a place, but a slumbering entity, and their charting of it had been an act of unintentional provocation. The question loomed, cold and sharp. What if the fortress wasn't merely a structure, but a living, breathing testament to an intelligence that had endured, unseen, for eons, and was now finally stirring awake beneath the very home of the Blackwoods? The sea off the Devil's Tooth grew unnaturally still, not the calm after a storm, but a profound quiet that swallowed all sound, a held breath before an impossible roar. Elias Blackwood, eyes wide with terror, spoke of a vibration, not of earth, but of the water itself, a hum resonating in his very bones. Clara, with the Unspoken Sea team, felt it too, a low thrumming, a frequency unknown to science, bypassing ears to speak directly to primal fear. A lament or a summons? Scientific instruments flickered. Deep-sea hydrophones, recently deployed, fell silent. Then, for a terrifying instant, they transmitted a sound defying all known acoustic properties. A chord, impossibly deep yet clear. A melody of crushing pressures and boundless void. It pulsed with a strange alien rhythm, a slow, deliberate life. Was this the fortress speaking? A direct warning or a chilling declaration? Then the ocean surface convulsed. Not a storm, but a localized disturbance off the Devil's Tooth. A colossal ripple expanded outwards, pushing against currents, its origin precisely where Elias's visions always culminated. The air grew heavy, thick with ozone and the metallic tang of something impossibly cold. Reality itself, seemed to stretch and fray, hinting at something vast stirring beneath. What force bent the water without wind or tide? Suddenly, a patch of water above the trench began to glow with faint internal luminescence. This was no bioluminescence. It was colder, pure, a light from an impossible source, belonging to no known spectrum. It pulsed slowly, rhythmically, in sync with the unseen thrumming. Was this a beacon, a portal, or merely the first glimpse of a living abyss? The seasoned investigators stood transfixed, instruments forgotten. Folklore now pulsed with terrifying reality beneath the waves. This was not just evidence, it was encounter. The first chilling whisper from the true depths. What did this impossible light signify? And what ancient consciousness had chosen to reveal itself? The Unspoken Sea investigative team, answering Clara's urgent call, arrived at the Blackwood estate. What they found was not immediate chaos, but an insidious unraveling of natural order. It began subtly, a faint, non-geological tremor, a hum beneath the foghorn's mournful cry, felt deep within the bone. Instruments deployed off the Devil's Tooth soon charted anomalies defying explanation, marking the chilling onset of their documentation. The first and most unsettling were the soundscapes. Hydrophones plunged into the churning waters captured not the Pacific's expected symphony, but something alien. A low, resonant pulse, rhythmic yet wildly unpredictable, surged periodically, causing the research vessel to groan. It was a sound emanating not from a point source, but from the abyss's very fabric. A bass note of unimaginable power vibrating through the water column and into the land, causing localized seismic readings that baffled geologists. What could generate such immense organic thrumming from the ocean floor? Then came the light. Fishermen's initial ravings converged into a chilling pattern of luminescent phenomena. Vast, undulating swathes of eerie, cold blue light would rise from the depths, briefly illuminating the midnight waters around the Devil's Tooth before vanishing. This was no gentle bioluminescence, but a stark, artificial radiance, as if a colossal, unseen mechanism briefly activated beneath the waves. One captain spoke of immense, fleeting shapes silhouetted against this ethereal glow, forms too vast, too angular, too other to be earthly creatures. Was this the true pulse of the fortress, or merely its distant, terrifying reflection? The impact wasn't confined to the ocean. On the Blackwood property, the ancient house clinging to the cliff, the very air thickened, humming with an oppressive weight. Elias Blackwood's visions, once internal, now bled into the environment. Faint, shimmering distortions rippled across windows, fleeting, subliminal glimpses of cyclopean structures or serpentine forms, vanishing in a blink. Clara, straddling science and dread, felt her reality warp. The Blackwood curse, once a whisper, was now a tangible pressure, a suffocating presence, defying rational explanation. The team, accustomed to logic, found their methodologies shredded. But the most alarming anomaly, shattering all notions, involved the water itself. Samples from the deep trench off the Devil's Tooth revealed traces of non-naturally occurring elements in unusual concentrations, and disturbingly, microscopic organic compounds unlike anything in known biological databases. These were not alien life forms, but complex molecular structures, hinting at an ecosystem utterly divorced from our understanding, perhaps even our planet's evolutionary timeline. It was a silent, chemical signature of something ancient, profound, and alive in a way we had yet to comprehend. What strange forces were at play, altering the ocean's very composition, hinting at existence beyond our wildest nightmares? The anomalies were no longer oddities. They were symptoms of a profound, encroaching reality. The creeping dread that now consumes the Blackwood family is not born of recent events alone. It is an echo, a resonance from a dark chord struck generations ago. Elias Blackwood's treasured yet terrifying inheritance, the ancient logbook, holds more than cryptic charts. It cradles the harrowing genesis of their nightmare. Within its brittle, salt-stained pages, a chilling narrative unfolds, penned by their whaling ancestors in the mid-19th century, during an era of relentless exploration and ruthless exploitation of the oceans. It was during one such harrowing voyage, venturing far south of Cape Horn, into waters rarely charted and feared even by the most hardened mariners, that the Blackwood patriarch of that age, Captain Alastair Blackwood, made a discovery that would forever shackle his lineage. Not a new whaling ground, nor a passage to untold riches, but something far older, far more potent. The log entries, initially triumphant in their charting of uncharted deeps, slowly descend into a litany of dread. They speak of peculiar seismic tremors emanating from the abyssal plains, of the sudden, unnatural silence of the whales they pursued, and finally, of a fortress of stone not built by human hands, glimpsed through a break in the perpetual mists. This secret fortress, as Alastair cryptically dubbed it, was not found. It was stumbled upon, an accidental intrusion into a realm never meant for the sun's embrace. The details are sparse, obscured by fear and fragmented by the passage of time, yet the implication is stark. A contact was made, a boundary breached. What transpired in those dark waters remains agonizingly unclear, but the entries hint at a burgeoning understanding of immense, non-terrestrial architecture, a place of profound power and slumbering entities. They describe a binding, a pact of silent witness, terms that resonate with a chilling, almost ritualistic solemnity. This historical discovery, far from being a moment of triumph, marked the precise moment the Blackwood family's destiny twisted into a lineage of custodianship over an unspeakable secret. The logbook records the crew's subsequent descent into madness, plagued by visions and a creeping paranoia that something had followed them from the depths. An invisible, intangible passenger on their return voyage to the American shores. Was this the true beginning of the curse? Did they unknowingly awaken a primordial intelligence, binding themselves to its ancient hunger, securing their coastal home not as a sanctuary, but as a future feeding ground? The truth of their first encounter with the abyssal entity remains shrouded in nautical myth, yet its horrifying repercussions echo with increasing ferocity across generations, culminating in the terror now unfolding at Devil's Tooth. What unholy bargain was struck in the profound darkness of the deep, and what blood price did it truly demand? The air around the Devil's Tooth, perpetually thick with the scent of brine and decaying kelp, had begun to shift. Taking on a heavier, almost viscous quality, it clung to the skin, whispering of forgotten depths. The team from the Unspoken Sea had established their advanced monitoring equipment, a web of sensors cast across the estate and into the turbulent waters below, hoping to decipher the chaotic data streams that had become the new normal. But the chaos was no longer just electromagnetic. It was becoming palpable. Elias Blackwood's decline had accelerated with terrifying speed. His once sharp eyes were now clouded, unfocused, darting between unseen terrors. Yet, in moments of chilling lucidity, he would describe in harrowing detail the cyclopean architecture, the impossible geometries of the abyssal fortress. But these were no longer mere visions confined to his mind. The strange, almost infrasonic hum that had permeated the old house since the seismic events now resonated with a deeper, more insistent thrum. Objects would vibrate faintly, the old timbers of the house seeming to groan in sympathy with Elias's torment. Clara, desperately monitoring her father, began to notice something far more disturbing. The water in the antique glass decanters on the study table would subtly ripple, not from vibrations in the floorboards, but in a peculiar rhythmic pattern, as if disturbed by an immense, unseen pulse. It mirrored the pulse Elias's own body seemed to be emitting, a chilling syncopation. Then came the whispers, at first faint, easily dismissed as the wind or the mournful foghorn. But they grew, a chorus of sibilant, guttural sounds, seemingly emanating from the very walls. From the very air itself, they were the inhuman cries reported by the lost trawlers, but now stripped bare of their mechanical distortion, raw and utterly alien, speaking a language of crushing pressure and eternal darkness. The most bizarre discovery manifested not in some distant seismic anomaly, nor in a buried artifact, but within Elias himself. One evening, as the abyssal whispers swelled to an almost unbearable crescendo, Elias Blackwood's skin began to show a subtle, iridescent sheen, like the slick scales of a deep-sea fish. His eyes, though still clouded, seemed to refract the ambient light in an unholy spectrum, reflecting the colors of the deepest ocean trenches. The temperature in the room plummeted, and a faint, sweet, decaying aroma, like that of primordial ocean flora, filled the air. This was the blood price, not an act of violence, but a terrifying, living transformation. The fortress was not merely a structure. It was a consuming process, and Elias was being gradually, horrifyingly, absorbed into its ancient, alien nature, becoming a living extension of the very secrets he sought to protect. What was happening to Elias was not illness, but an unholy communion, a grotesque evolution driven by the forgotten waters. The Blackwood lineage wasn't just cursed, it was being reclaimed, folded back into the abyssal entity from which its secrets had been dredged. Was this the ultimate demand of the ancient pact? Was Elias being reshaped, or merely hollowed out to become a conduit for something truly unimaginable? Are you ready to uncover the secrets of the deep? The deeper the Unspoken Sea team delved into the data, the more unsettling the patterns became. Seismic readings from the Devil's Tooth, once dismissed as mere geological anomalies, now painted a chillingly coherent picture. These were not random tremors, but rhythmic pulses, almost a heartbeat, emanating from the abyssal depths directly beneath the Blackwood estate. Clara, her scientific skepticism warring with a dawning dread, cross-referenced these pulses with Elias's increasingly vivid visions. She found an impossible correlation. Each spike in seismic activity preceded a surge in her father's nightmares, a horrifying synchronicity that defied all known scientific principles. The logbook, once a cryptic historical artifact, began to reveal a new, terrifying layer of truth. Elias's ancestor, Captain Theron Blackwood, had meticulously charted not just the coastlines, but also the strangely fluctuating magnetic fields of the region. His entries spoke of anomalous currents and vibrations from the deep, dismissed by historians as fanciful sailors' lore. But now, with the modern instruments of the Unspoken Sea team, those very fluctuations were being re-recorded, mirroring the patterns Theron had sketched over a century ago. It was as if the very ocean floor had a memory, echoing a disturbance initiated long ago. What if the secret fortress wasn't a static ruin, but an active, responsive entity? This was the horrifying question that began to take root in their minds. The cyclopean architecture Elias envisioned, with its impossibly vast chambers and strange, alien conduits, suggested a purpose far beyond mere shelter. It appeared to be a mechanism, perhaps a generator, or even a living, calcified heart, drawing sustenance from the world above. The missing trawlers, their distress calls abruptly silenced by inhuman cries, now seemed less like isolated incidents and more like offerings, a blood price. Clara wrestled with the implications. Her training demanded logic, empirical proof. Yet the evidence accumulating pointed towards something primordial, something that transcended human understanding and defied the laws of physics. The Blackwood curse, once a family legend, was now manifesting as an ecological catastrophe, a drain on the very lifeblood of the Pacific Northwest. Was the fortress truly awakening, or had it merely been sleeping, its ancient hunger now stirred by the encroaching world? The investigative team uncovered ancient coastal legends, oral histories whispered among forgotten tribes, tales of a monstrous watcher beneath the waves, a leviathan bound by an ancient pact, awakened by the disturbance of forbidden waters. These were not mere myths, but chilling premonitions, echoes of a truth meticulously documented yet deliberately forgotten. The secret fortress, it seemed, was less a place of defense and more a prison, or perhaps a crucible. And the Blackwood lineage, unknowingly, had become the key to its unbinding. We had followed the trail of physical evidence, charted the known world, but the deepest abyss demands a different kind of map. Are we truly prepared to confront the living heart of this nightmare, beating just beneath the waves, demanding its ancient due? The terrifying clarity that emerged from Elias Blackwood's fragmented visions, once dismissed as mere delirium, now paints a cohesive, horrific picture. The ancient logbook, meticulously deciphered by Clara and the Unspoken Sea team, speaks not of a mere structure, but of a pulsating, living architecture, an organism of stone and thought that defies every known biological and physical law. We are forced to confront the chilling possibility that the secret fortress is not merely a place of containment, but a sentient entity, an apex predator of primordial design. Its true form, glimpsed in Elias's nightmares and whispered through generations of Blackwood lore, is less about walls and gates, and more about an abyssal intelligence that has lain dormant, a consciousness woven into the very fabric of the deep. This leads us to the heart of the primordial pact, a covenant so ancient its origins are lost even to the Blackwood annals, yet its consequences remain chillingly current. The logbook hints at an exchange, a desperate bargain struck by the earliest whalers in their insatiable pursuit of the unknown. They did not merely discover the fortress, they awakened something within it, perhaps feeding it with their very curiosity, their ambition, their hubris. And what did this awakened entity demand in return? The Blackwood curse, the blood price, begins to reveal itself not as random misfortune, but as a systematic, generational tether, a slow consumption. Consider the implications. Is the fortress a vast, biological machine absorbing the essence of the lineage that disturbed it? are the disappearances of the trawlers, the inhuman cries, the seismic events, not just random acts of a roused monster, but calculated withdrawals from an ancient account. The Blackwoods, unknowingly, became both the keepers of a terrible secret and the unwitting nourishment for an abyssal hunger. The cyclopean architecture Elias sees might not be an inert ruin, but the calcified structure of a gargantuan, non-human mind, slowly expanding its influence, extending tendrils of psychic energy into the very lives of those bound to its periphery. This shifts our understanding of the mystery from a localized haunting to a slow existential invasion. The Devil's Tooth, once a marker of geographical peril, becomes the focal point of a spiritual one, a place where the veil between worlds thins, drawn taut by the relentless pull of a forgotten consciousness. Clara's scientific mind struggles to reconcile the biological imperative with this profound, almost spiritual, parasitic relationship. She grapples with the idea that her ancestors didn't just find a fortress, but became intricately, horrifyingly entangled with its very being. The sea around them is not just water. It is a medium for a vast, ancient will. But what if the Blackwood struggle is not merely about survival, but about an unholy merger already underway? What if the blood price demanded is not just their lives, but their very identity, their very souls, slowly becoming extensions of something unspeakably old and vast? Could the family be transforming, subtly, unknowingly, into parts of the fortress itself, fulfilling a role in its unfathomable design? The whispers of forgotten waters carry more than laments. They carry the echoes of a profound, irreversible transformation. Are the Blackwoods merely paying a debt? Or are they being assimilated into the very fabric of the abyssal entity they disturbed? The truth, if it can be called that, is far more terrifying than any curse. Historical records, meticulously compiled by our team, reveal a chilling pattern. What official maritime reports dismissed as anomalies, rogue waves, sudden shifts in the ocean floor, or even the inexplicable vanishing of entire fleets, now coalesce into a terrifying tapestry. We've traced these incidents not just along the Oregon coast, but extending into the darkest, most desolate stretches of the Pacific, all centered around coordinates disturbingly close to locations Elias Blackwood marked in his ancestors' logbook. These were not mere acts of nature. They were echoes of the secret fortress's awakening, its malevolent guardians stirring, demanding their due. The official narrative, designed to maintain order, unwittingly shielded the world from a truth too profound, too monstrous. Clara's own research, cross-referenced with geological surveys, now indicates that the seismic activity wasn't just tectonic, it was resonant. The very earth beneath the Devil's Tooth has been responding to a presence, a pulse from unfathomable depths, vibrating with an ancient purpose. This wasn't merely a family's burden. It was a localized manifestation of a global horror, drawn to their lineage by a primordial pact. The Blackwoods' ancestors, in their hubris and their hunger for discovery, didn't just stumble upon a ruin. They awakened a sentinel, bound by rules alien to our reality, its existence predating human civilization. And now, the reckoning. The mournful wail of the foghorn, once a symbol of guidance, has become a dirge, a siren call for the true masters of the deep. The waters around the Devil's Tooth churn with an unnatural ferocity, not of storms, but of an immense, coiled power preparing to surface. Elias, his mind fractured by visions, now stands on the precipice, his body a conduit for the very entity he sought to understand. The blood price is being demanded, not in sacrifice, but in assimilation. The whispers Clara heard, the strange currents, the chilling echoes of inhuman cries from the vanished trawlers. They are converging. The fortress isn't just a structure. It's a living, breathing entity, a prison and a guardian, now breached. We stand at the threshold of a confrontation, not with history, but with eternity. The Blackwood curse, once a whispered legend, has manifested. The abyss stares back, and this time, it brings a hunger that transcends the physical. We are no longer observing. We are immersed. The struggle for their very souls, for the essence of humanity itself, culminates here on these desolate shores. The final price is due. The sea is not merely rising, it is claiming what it is owed. The Blackwood estate, a sentinel against the relentless roar of the Pacific, now holds a different kind of silence. The mournful wail of the foghorn, once a lament, now carries echoes of a truth far more profound, far more terrifying. Elias Blackwood, forever marked by abyssal visions, walks a path between worlds, his eyes holding unspeakable knowledge. His mind remains a repository of cosmic dread, a living archive of the ocean's darkest secrets. Clara, transfumed by the harrowing ordeal, has embraced her lineage not as a curse, but as a sacred, terrifying stewardship. She now dedicates her life to the liminal spaces where science and myth converge. The Devil's Tooth stands sentinel, its crags imbued with a heavier, older silence, a testament to the thin veil separating our world from the abyssal unknown. They did not conquer the ancient hunger, for such primordial forces cannot be defeated by human will. They merely bore witness to its enduring presence, a recognition that brought a fragile, unsettling peace. The harrowing odyssey of the Blackwoods, documented through chilling footage by the Unspoken Sea, compels us to reconsider humanity's true place in existence. What if our perception of reality is but a shimmering surface, and beneath, an older, vaster intelligence churns? What if Earth's true chronicle is not written in human annals, but etched into crushing, lightless depths, guarded by entities whose very being defies our understanding of life, time, and consciousness? The secret fortress off Cape Horn is not merely a hidden structure. It is a profound philosophical statement, a testament to a primordial era when myth and empirical reality were fluid, when the deep held dominion over land, and primeval echoes shaped destinies unseen. This unsettling realization is precisely why the Unspoken Sea embarks on these perilous journeys. Not to provide definitive answers, for some truths are too vast, too ancient for our finite minds to grasp, but to pose questions that rip open the fabric of our comfortable illusions. We delve into the darkest currents of legend and fact, sifting through forgotten fragments of history, daring to cast a flickering light into what the ocean chooses to conceal. We are driven by an insatiable curiosity, a primal urge to comprehend the whispers from the deep, to document inexplicable forces that have shaped our planet from beyond our sight. We do not seek to conquer the unknown. Instead, we strive to respectfully bear witness to its terrifying, sublime grandeur. Were the Blackwoods truly cursed, or merely the latest inheritors, bound by an ancient pact, tethered to a vigilance humanity has long abandoned? Does the ocean truly harbor a malevolent hunger, or does it merely react with primordial force to our persistent trespasses, a colossal living memory preserving truths we dare not acknowledge? And what other fortresses, what other unfathomable guardians lie slumbering in the abyssal plains, waiting for the seismic tremors of our hubris to awaken them once more. The search for truth never ends, and ours is just beginning.